Wreckage wasn't supposed to move like this. Reese watched through the second chance's forward viewport as a massive hull section rotated past them. The piece, easily 20 meters long, turned in a perfect arc, as if following an invisible track. Behind it, smaller fragments moved in precise counterpoint, like dancers in some macabre ballet. "That's from the Meridian Survey ship Horizon's Edge," Rhonda said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers moved across her console, but her eyes remained fixed on the debris. It disappeared 32 years ago. The metal should show more degradation. Should show any degradation, Al corrected. He stood behind the pilot station, one hand resting on the back of Reese's chair. "That's bare hull plating. 3 decades of cosmic radiation. It ought to be pitted, discolored. This looks fresh off the assembly line." Another piece drifted into view. A sensor array, its delicate instruments still intact. It moved perpendicular to the hull section, maintaining an exact distance that couldn't be natural in zero gravity. 7, Rhonda announced suddenly. 7 what? Reese asked, though part of him already knew. 7 different ships. I've identified wreckage from 7 different vessels so far. The Horizon's Edge, the Wanderlust. She paused, checking her readings. That can't be right. What? That section there. She pointed to a curved piece of plating that gleamed dully in their external lights. It matches the profile of the star's reach. But the star's reach disappeared 8 months before I was born. The metal composition, she trailed off, staring at her readings. Matches factory specs exactly. I'll finished for her. Like it was pulled off the production line yesterday. Reese adjusted their course slightly, threading the second chance through the ongoing dance of debris. Each piece they passed triggered another identification from Rhonda, another impossible preservation that defied natural law. "You ever hear about Sven Larsson?" Al asked suddenly, his voice taking on the quiet tone he used when discussing his military days. He was the only survivor from the Crystal Path expedition, 10 years back. Found him in a life pod at the edge of the quiet, barely conscious. "I remember," Rhonda said. "He claimed he saw things. The review board said it was oxygen deprivation. Saw his ship flying next to him, perfectly mirrored. Said he watched himself waving from the other ship's viewport right before his pod ejected." Al's hand tightened on Reese's chair. "They said he was crazy. Had to be, right? Except his pod's logs showed it ejected automatically. No warning, no malfunction. Just decided to save his life while the rest of his crew vanished." "Where's Larsson now?" Reese asked, though the growing knot in his stomach suggested he knew the answer. "Took a solo mining contract 6 months ago, never came back." Al's laugh held no humor. "Guess he wanted answers too badly." The second chance's sensors chirped, drawing their attention forward. A new shape had emerged from the darkness ahead. At first it appeared to be another piece of debris, but as their lights played across its surface, the true scale became clear. "That's," Rhonda's voice caught. "That's the Daybreak. Crew of 12. Disappeared 4 years ago during a standard survey mission." The ship hung in space like a museum display. Its hull had been peeled open with surgical precision, every deck exposed to vacuum. Around it, components orbited in a perfect spiral, engine parts, life support systems, sensor arrays, all arranged like illustrations in a technical manual. "Those cuts," Al said, leaning forward to study the display. "No weapon did that. No collision. That's deliberate work. Someone or something took that ship apart piece by piece, laid it out like they were studying it." Rhonda finished. "Learning how it worked. Their own ship's systems chose that moment to fluctuate. The lights dimmed momentarily, and the recyclers hitched in their endless cycle. When power returned to normal, all 3 of them were staring at their own reflections in the viewport, trying not to think about what else might be watching them from the darkness beyond. "New sensor contact," Rhonda reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Energy signature matches a distress beacon." She looked up, meeting Reese's eyes. "It's the Never Dawn." Reese nodded, making minute adjustments to their course. Around them, the debris continued its eternal dance, each piece moving with impossible precision. Somewhere ahead, French Biggs's brother and his crew waited to be found, or whatever was left of them. The second chance pushed deeper into the quiet, its hull reflected in countless polished fragments of dead ships. In the distance, something that might have been singing tickled the edge of hearing, too faint to be sure it wasn't just imagination. Behind them, the dissected corpse of the Daybreak receded into darkness, its components still orbiting in their perfect spiral, a warning or a welcome mat. None of them were sure which anymore. "That's impossible," Rhonda said for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Her hands flew across her console, running the same scan again. The Never Dawn's beacon is coming from 4 different locations, simultaneously, at exactly the same signal strength. The second chance hung motionless relative to the debris field, its external lights illuminating the endless dance of preserved wreckage. They'd cut main power to reduce their signature, running on auxiliaries only. "Show me," Reese said, turning from the pilot station. The holographic display flickered to life, showing their position at the center of a 3-dimensional grid. 4 identical signals pulsed in different directions, forming a perfect tetrahedron around their location. "What could be reflections?" Al suggested, but his tone said he didn't believe it. "Some kind of natural phenomenon." "No," Rhonda shook her head. "I compensated for every known form of signal reflection or distortion. These are 4 identical sources, broadcasting the exact same distress call. It's like someone copied the beacon." Reese finished. "Made perfect duplicates." The ship's lighting chose that moment to shift, cycling through patterns that shouldn't have been possible with their electrical configuration. Shadows danced across the bridge in geometric shapes before returning to normal. I'll move to one of the viewports, studying the debris field. "Something's moving out there." Reese joined him, following his gaze. At first he saw nothing but the usual choreographed motion of wreckage. Then a shadow passed between 2 larger pieces of debris, something that didn't match any of the cataloged fragments. "Get me external camera 3, Al ordered. Rhonda complied, bringing the feed up on a secondary display. The camera showed only empty space where they'd seen the movement. "Play it back," Al said, frame by frame. They watched as the recording stepped through the sequence. For a fraction of a second between one frame and the next, a distortion appeared, like heat waves rising from hot pavement, but in the vacuum of space. "What was that?" Reese asked. "Something our sensors didn't detect," Rhonda answered, her voice tight. "Something that doesn't show up on any spectrum we can scan." I'll sniff the air. "Anyone else taste that?" They all knew what he meant. The recycled air had taken on a metallic tang that none of their filters should have allowed through, like blood and ozone and something else, something alien. "New contact," Rhonda reported, professional calm warring with growing unease. "Bearing 037 Mark 12. It's a cluster of escape pods." The pods hung in space ahead of them, arranged in a perfect circle like numbers on a clock face. As they drew closer, Reese could make out registry numbers from different ships, different eras, all preserved as perfectly as the rest of the debris. "Life signs?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "None." Rhonda's fingers trembled slightly as she worked her console. "They're all sealed, all empty." A sound came through the comms then, faint and distant, like music played underwater. It lasted only seconds before fading. "Tell me that was a corrupted transmission," Al said. Rhonda shook her head. "No transmission. Nothing on any channel." But she paused, double-checking her readings. "The Never Dawn's beacons all synchronized when we heard it." Just for a moment they pulsed in unison. Reese returned to the pilot station, making minute adjustments to keep them stationary relative to the debris field. "Any change in the beacon locations?" "They're moving," Rhonda said, staring at her display. "All 4 signals maintaining their perfect geometric pattern, but they're converging. Leading us somewhere." "Where?" She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Deeper in, towards the center of the quiet. I'll check the weapon locker beside his station for the 3rd time in an hour." You ever notice how in old Earth horror stories, the characters always know they're walking into a trap, but they go anyway? "We're not characters in a story," Reese said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "We're explorers. This is what we do." "Yeah," Al nodded, his hand resting on the locker's lock. "That's probably what the Daybreak's crew thought too." Around them, the preserved wreckage continued its impossible dance. Somewhere ahead, 4 identical copies of the Never Dawn's beacon called to them like sirens. The taste of metal grew stronger in the recycled air, and in the distant darkness, something that might have been singing waited to welcome them deeper into the quiet. Reese engaged the engines, and the second chance moved forward, following the convergence of signals. None of them mentioned how the debris seemed to part before them, creating a perfect corridor into darkness. None of them needed to. The Never Dawn appeared first as a silhouette against the swirling colors of the cloud, a dark shape that refused to reflect their spotlights. As they drew closer, details emerged: the ship's sleek hull, its registration numbers, the subtle scorching around its primary thrusters. Everything looked perfectly normal, which somehow made it worse. "No exterior damage," Al reported, studying the ship through magnified camera feeds. "No signs of combat or collision, it's just sitting there." "Power readings?" Reese asked. Rhonda shook her head. Nothing. The ship's completely cold. Temperature readings are, she paused, running the scan again. That can't be right. The hull temperature is registering below what's theoretically possible, even in deep space. Around the Never Dawn, smaller pieces of debris orbited in perfect concentric circles, like ripples frozen in space. Each ring contained fragments arranged by size and type, a methodical cataloging of the ship's lost components. Getting some weird energy spikes, Rhonda said. They appear and vanish too fast to analyze. Almost like something scanning us. Al finished. He'd moved to the weapons station, though they all knew conventional weapons would be useless if the Quiet decided to add them to its collection. Reese brought them closer, maintaining a careful approach vector. What about the beacons? All 4 signals converged here, then vanished the moment we spotted the ship. Rhonda's fingers danced across her console. I'm trying to access their records, see if I can track where they originated from. But the data keeps corrupting whenever I get close. The second chance's external lights played across the Never Dawn's hull, revealing more details. The ship's own running lights were dark, its viewports black. No signs of internal illumination, no indication that anything still lived within. Initiating bioscan, Rhonda announced. Moments passed as the sensors probed the derelict vessel. No life signs, nothing moving inside at all. Al had unholstered his sidearm, checking its charge for the 3rd time. So why does it feel like something's watching us? As if in answer, the Never Dawn's primary airlock cycled open. The massive door swung outward smoothly, without power, without signals, without any reason it should be able to move at all. That's impossible, Rhonda whispered. The ship has no power, none. That airlock is rated at 12 tons. It can't just status of their atmosphere, Reese interrupted. More scans. Internal pressure is stable. Atmosphere reads as normal composition. Temperature is the same impossible cold as the hull, but otherwise she looked up from her readings. It's perfectly habitable in there. The ship's comms crackled. For a moment they all tensed, expecting another burst of that distant singing. Instead they heard nothing but static, yet the static seemed to have rhythm, like conversations just below the threshold of hearing. We have to go in, Reese said finally. That's French's brother in there, or at least answers about what happened to him. Suits? Al asked, already moving toward the storage lockers. Full EVA gear, Reese confirmed. I don't trust those atmospheric readings, no matter how normal they look. They prepared in silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they checked seals and tested systems. The suits were top of the line, designed for deep space rescue operations. Each came equipped with enhanced sensors, powerful lights, and enough air for 6 hours. Docking collar or EVA? Rhonda asked as she sealed her helmet. EVA, Reese and Al said simultaneously. None of them wanted to physically connect their ship to the Never Dawn. Final checks completed, they gathered near the second chance's airlock. Through the viewport, they could see the Never Dawn's open door, a rectangle of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow their external lights. Anyone else hear that? Al asked suddenly. They stood perfectly still, listening through their helmet comms. At first, there was nothing but the soft sound of their own breathing. Then, faintly, they heard it, a sound like distant singing, growing clearer with each passing second. It's coming from inside the Never Dawn, Rhonda said, checking readings on her suit's displays. But I'm not detecting any sound waves, any vibrations, anything that could. The singing grew louder, more distinct, though still maddeningly just beyond comprehension. It seemed to echo inside their helmets, as if the sound was bypassing their suit's audio pickups entirely. Last chance to back out, Reese said, his hand hovering over the airlock controls. Al checked his suit's weapon mount one final time. We don't leave survivors behind. Even if they're probably already dead, the readings we get in there could explain everything that's happened in the Quiet, Rhonda added. We have to know. Reese nodded and activated the airlock cycle. As the chamber depressurized, they watched the Never Dawn's dark entrance grow larger in their view. The singing in their helmets grew stronger, and now it almost seemed to have words, almost seemed to be calling them by name. The outer door opened, and they prepared to make their way across the void between ships. The last thing they saw before leaving the second chance was their own reflections in the airlock's inner door, 3 suited figures, distorted by the curved surface, and for just a moment, it looked like their reflections waved goodbye. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.